Hi guys, ChannelBK here. Oh, there's some stuff on the camera. Since I last did a classic review, when you guys saw Injury Reserve, I grew really tall. So tall, in fact, that clearly I can't be on camera even though I'm standing up. If I sit down, I'm still off camera. I didn't know this was going to be a problem. But yeah, you're gonna have to just look at my belly. It's very long, as you can clearly tell. Don't look at the pants. It's not my pants, clearly. But we're here to talk about an album for the 10-year anniversary of The Tallest Man on Earth, now taken by me, The Wild Hunt. So as I start shrinking down, let's start talking about the album. The Tallest Man on Earth is the singer-songwriter project of singer-songwriter Christian Matson. And this is his sophomore record, following up Shallow Grave, which came out, I believe, 2 years before. And this sort of threw him into that indie folk sphere. And I really like this album a lot. I do think it has a very raw recording sound to it, which isn't necessarily the worst. Clearly, it must have been a mix of just maybe something he wanted to do and also just budgeting and him sort of becoming a big artist. Clearly, he couldn't just jump in with this masterful recording. But this is the album that clearly follows it up. And I'm just going to be straight up with you on this one. Again, like the Injury Reserve album, I just really wish this was an album that I listened to back in the day. I wasn't really doing album reviews that intensely like that, but this is definitely an album that I really loved, and I wish I were to have listened to it back in the day when it first came out. And this album is, in my opinion, a more well-refined version of his first album. I think the songs are even more well put together. The songwriting is incredible. The musicianship is great. It's not something that's necessarily so brand new and different, but it definitely still is put together very well. And again, it's not necessarily an album that's supposed to be this all over the place, over the top craziness, because in a lot of ways you do have to kind of look at where Christian, Tallest Man, were at that point, because obviously Christian, one of his biggest influences is someone like a Bob Dylan, and you can definitely tell a lot of the Bob Dylan influences on this album, but a lot of the folk acts at that time were sort of either going into new territory, or it was kind of very divisive to something like Mumford & Sons, which obviously is a huge act now, or something like, I don't know, like Fleet Foxes at that time. These were also two groups where Fleet Foxes were making very grand, all over the place compositions, and then something like Mumford & Sons was kind of going for that more regal sort of folk sound, and it worked well for them at the time. And I don't necessarily hate Mumford & Sons, and I obviously love Fleet Foxes, but these were definitely two different directions that they were going. Christian wasn't in that path. He was sort of taking a lot of aesthetic sounds that were very familiar, something like a Mumford & Sons, but he was also doing stuff that in terms of like musically, it had like that kind of old school ruggedness, folk sound, and of course his voice is just incredible and has this raw intensity. And this album is just great song after great song, and again, it's not necessarily an album that's overly complicated, but again, the songwriting's incredible. It's super beautiful. I love just his metaphors a lot. I do think his whole earth tone of, like, you know, talking about the moon and the sun and the ground and, you know, all that sort of stuff, the water, the rivers, all that sort of stuff is incredible and gorgeous. And again, it's definitely some songwriting that we don't necessarily hear as much. He sort of is bringing back a lot of those aesthetic choices. And with the topics that are on this album, there is a lot about love and loss and life and death, which actually opens up the album, The Wild Hunt, which is a song about the fascination of death. I do like kind of the up-tempo-ness of the song. I think it gets us into the album really well. I think this definitely introduces a lot of stuff that we hear on here with great choruses, Again, great musicality. I think Christian is just really great at, like, whenever he's just playing normal acoustic guitar, he does a lot of fun rhythmic stuff with it to give it character, to give it a little bit more life. And I think this is a great track. And again, the songwriting on here is great, and the whole connection to the Wild Hunt and that mythology is great. And then we followed up with Burden of Tomorrow, which again, the musicality and the way that he opens it, I think is great. It has sort of like this plucky feel to it. I also like how near the end, before we get the finale of the song, that just kind of guitar solo rather, I thought it's really, really good. And then we followed up with Troubles Will Be Gone, which again is just another great song. One of the songwriting things I love on here is in the final verse where he's talking about, he has this metaphor on this song about, you know, getting to the hill and there's this sign that says this or whatever. And I love how at the end of the song he gets to the point where you climb the tallest hill or what. I'm trying to think of the line specifically, but it's that whole, you get to the top of the hill, you see a sign and goes, there's still a bigger one. There's still a taller one to climb. There's still that sort of thing. I really like that. It's a very gorgeous metaphor of just, you know, kind of moving on, just climbing bigger hills, getting to bigger goals. And I think it's just, again, just beautiful song. And just everything about it is great. And again, I feel like there are a lot of repetitive things about a lot of the natures on these songs. But again, I think it's just Christian doing great songwriting, and he's doing what Tallest Man does best. You're Going Back, I think, once again, songwriting wise, is some of the better, I should say, metaphors on this entire album. I really like, again, the raw intensity of the guitar and his vocals. Again, there are some elements and some times on this album that kind of remind me of Shallow Grave in terms of the recording of it. I love the line of, like, you know, swimming from your heaven, like that sort of whole run. The Drying of the Lawns, once again, is, I think, a really great tune. I love where it gets to the fourth verse and the song kind of stops in terms of the music of the song, and it gets back into it again. There are a few moments on this album where Christian kind of just throws in random stuff to kind of add a little bit of character and depth. The whole chorus to the song is about this love that was supposed to be light and bright and have all of this life to it and all this fullness of a summer love. And it's sort of this whole, no, it's the drying of the lawns, because it's getting to the fall. It's getting to this point where it's not as lively and fruitful as the people thought it was. King of Spain is incredible. It's one of the singles that came off of this album. It has such a great sort of Spanish feel to it. It really does. Like, it doesn't come off as like corny or anything. I love just the drive of it. Again, Christian's storytelling on here is just so incredible and just so, not over the top, but it's just really well written. I really like the whole metaphor of this song about how he was picked by someone to be his lover, so he feels like he just needs to be this big grand person, so he equivalates it to the King of Spain. By the end of the song, it sort of becomes this thing of like, no, like, you don't need to be that person, which kind of switches the mood when a song like this is so hopeful. Then we followed up to Love Is All, which is a very sad song. It's definitely one of the more darker, moodier tracks that Tallest Man has ever done. And this song is sort of like a divorce song. It's this really just depressing deconstruction of a relationship, and it's brutal. It's brutal. Again, Christian, just the way he delivers the vocals and the way he writes these intricate songs, and again, just the musicality of it, he sets the mood and you just understand the vibe. And I do like how this song has that kind of repeating notion on every time that he sings, he repeats it and he's like, oh, 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 I like that too. 1,000 Ways, in my honest opinion, has the most gorgeous chorus on the entire album. Christian's performance on it is so, like, mesmerizing. It gives me chills every time I listen to it. And then we get to something like A Lion's Heart, which songwriting wise and construction is incredible. The story of just, from what I took of it, is a guy coming from one place, climbing these hills, coming into the city, falling in love with someone, and how he's not made for that city life. It's definitely, again, like a lot of Tallest Man songs, it has that love element. It has great sort of epic heights it goes to, but it also has a lot of depressing lows. And then we finish this album with Kids on the Run, which is definitely a huge, huge, huge teaser to his following album in terms of musically. Obviously, the song brings a lot more in terms of an ambiance to it. The pianos on it, I think, are chilling, and it has sort of this epic grand feel. I do think Tallest Man sounds great on here. I think the songwriting on here feels slightly different from what Tallest Man has done on this album, in my opinion. I do think there is a little bit of a difference to that in terms of him sort of foreshadowing where he goes next. And it definitely kind of throws you off with the finale of this album. I do feel like it fits though, because it doesn't seem too out of place, too out of pocket, because I do feel like there is elements to it that still fit for this album, and just the storytelling of it is great. And again, this was something where I debated doing the third album, because that was definitely a switch up for Christian. In my opinion though, I think in terms of where he was coming from the first album to this album, it's just incredible, and I think the songwriting's way better, and the actual sound of the album's great. And again, it's not an overly complicated, put together album, but it's just fantastic. It's really great, and it's been out for 10 years now, which is crazy, and it still sounds incredible, and I think this is easily one of Christian's best. It's incredible, and in terms of indie folk at that time, I think it's definitely one of the standouts. So if you've listened to this record, again, I feel like I repeat myself, but you get it. Comments below about what you think of it, and in terms of songs that you like in comparisons to other Tallest Man records. If you liked, please like and please subscribe. Go check out all the other classic reviews. Thank you guys so much for watching, and thank you for tuning in to Channel BK. Peace out, guys.